Shakespeare often set the tone for his plays in the first act itself, and if you've read Macbeth or watched any of its adaptations, you might be familiar with the three witches, who set the grim and violent tone for the rest of the epic tragedy. Now, where did Shakespeare get his inspirations from? Well, according to Sandman Comics and the Netflix TV series, it was Morpheus, aka Dream, who inspired Shakespeare with his stories, and Dream's own story was heavily influenced by the Three, who were also known as the Fates and the Kindly Ones, among other names. They're pretty much the representation of the Maiden, Mother, and Crone, and as such, they are these cosmic-level and weird entities who even gods fear because such is their power. They follow the old rules and punish oath-breakers, the kin-killers, and those who defy divine laws. Now, in this video, we're going to explore everything there is to explore about the three sisters, the three who are one, including the comics, which also detail the story about to unfold in the second half of Sandman's second season. So if you're not one to brave spoilers, you know what to do. Oh, and before we begin, if you like the video, please leave a like and touch that subscribe button. Those 2 taps from you will help us tremendously in bringing you more of these marvelous videos. And with that said, let's get this thing started.
One who is three. The Hecate.
Summoned by Sandman. In the Sandman universe, the Fates appear for the first time in issue number 2, when Lucian suggests Morpheus summon the Three in One, and in the Netflix show, they appear in the second episode. In both media, Morpheus doesn't hate the idea, as he knows that only the Fates or the Kindly Ones would be able to give him the whereabouts of what he seeks, his tools: the helm, the ruby, and the sand. Now, we're sure most people watch the show and don't read the comic book, so for the sake of most viewers, we're going to explore most events from the comics perspective, and moreover, the show mostly follows the comics, and as for the differences, we'll keep telling you about them as they come up. Comprende? I can't actually hear you, but I trust I have your green light, or you'd let me know in the comments, and we'll take your advice for the future. Now, Dream basically pulls out the Dreaming's version of a shopping list and starts gathering the weird ingredients needed to call them up, and since they would not just answer his questions, he needs to offer them something too. He snatches a crossroads from the dream of a Cambodian farmer who's craving a new ox cart. The gallows come from a Japanese horror movie buff. The rest of the stuff, like some snakes, honey, and a crescent moon, he finds without much trouble, but he also needed a black lamb, which was a bit more difficult to find, but he succeeded in getting one in the dreams of a kid in Adelaide. Yup, in Australia. Now, most rituals would stop there, but Morpheus knows these witches aren't cheap. He needs something valuable, something personal, so he waits until midnight, sets up the ritual, and the air around him starts to buzz. A dust devil spins to life, and it was from this thing that the three witches appeared before Sandman. Honestly, they're hard to forget. They are the Crone, the Mother, and the Maiden, and I'm sure you must have heard about them from all those Game of Thrones weddings. At the end of the video, we will explain the numerous iterations of the Kindly Ones. I mean, they've existed in stories that stretch back as far as ancient Greece and carried on in various forms through the Roman civilization to the Anglo-Saxons, and they even met Macbeth. Yup, it was the same three witches that Shakespeare introduced in the first act of his immortal tragedy. Anyways, coming back to the Fates from Sandman, together, they're a single entity split across 3 lifetimes. They address him by his name, Morpheus, and they know he needs something. Morpheus plays it smart. He flatters them, greases the wheels, and they finally introduce themselves. The young one is Cynthia, the middle-aged one is Mildred, and the eldest is Mordred. While Morpheus continues buttering them up, Mordred catches a creature, Mildred eats it, and Cynthia swallows it whole with a burp. However, this was not shown in the TV series. Here, the snake that Morpheus brought enters Mildred's mouth, goes down her throat as deep as it could, and then they show Cynthia swallowing the whole thing with a smile on her face. It is now that Morpheus asks about his tools, but like him, they're bound by rules. They owe him 3 answers, one from each, no more, no less. First, he asks about his pouch. Cynthia says a man named Constantine was the last one to buy it, but whether he still has it is a mystery. Of course, we know that John was gender swapped and made Johanna in the show, but anyways, Mildred says that the ruby was traded to a demon ages ago and is no longer on Earth. Mordred said that the ruby ended up with the Justice League. Anyways, all of this didn't happen in the TV show. Constantine leads him to the sand, he finds the helm in hell, and as for the ruby, it was in the possession of John Dee, the son of Roderick Burgess, the guy who had caged Sandman for a century. You see, all those 3 things had been stolen by John's mother when she fled. Meeting John Dee. Next, we see the witches meet John Dee, who was also known as Dr. Destiny. So John had managed to escape from the hospital in Buffalo in the TV show and Arkham Asylum in the comic book. He got the ruby too, and with it came immense powers. John arrives at a small diner and takes control of the people. When the Fates arrived, John was already in his madness arc and was surrounded by mutilated bodies of people who were at the diner. John asks about his future, and they tell him that he has no future, and the only future he will have would be to live for the rest of his life locked inside prison walls and madness. However, he's very pleased when he hears them say, "You will crush out the Dream Lord's life in your hands."
How do you know my name? Who are you?
Names.
The Rose Walker encounter. Later, in issue number 10, the witches return. This time they approach Rose Walker. Rose doesn't know it yet, but she's knee-deep in Dream's business. The witches try to warn her in the same cryptic tone, but the way they spoke was more than what Rose could comprehend without getting confused. They clearly know about her missing brother, Jed, but Rose asks the wrong questions. They wanted to tell her about Jed, the Corinthian, and Dream, but now they can't because they had their rules. As they fade, they leave her with a strange farewell. They call her their sparrow, daughter, sister, and child.
Beautiful voice.
Meeting Calliope. At some point in the current millennium, the eldest daughter of Zeus and Mnemosyne found herself in the possession of a disgusting but famous novelist. You see, this woman, Calliope, was a muse, much like 8 of her sisters, and Calliope could inspire you to write epic poetry and heroic verse with eloquence, but she could also help you with inspirations of all kinds to write stories. Anyways, Calliope had been kept as a slave by this wicked man, and when he was done with her, he gave her away to another struggling writer named Richard Maddock. Now, the thing with Calliope was that she needed to be freed because she was a muse, kind of like Dobby the elf from Harry Potter. And although Maddock promised to free her after one novel, you know how men are, never wanting to let go of things they like. So, in the end, Maddock also wanted to keep her with himself forever, but Calliope pled to the Fates and they arrived in their Greek aspect. She begged the 3 to free her, but she was bound by divine law and told that there was nothing they could do. However, the Endless were not bound by such rules, and as it happened, Morpheus was once Calliope's husband. Calliope initially refused to call him because they parted on very horrible terms and because of a very tragic incident, and she believed he would never come to her help. But they explained to her that he was now a changed man, or god aspect thing, mostly because of how he was imprisoned for 100 years by mortals. The Fates offer her their deepest condolences and leave her side. That's pretty much every important event regarding the Fates in Season 1, but they appear again in Season 2, or issue 21, in the comic book.
Greetings to you, destiny of the endless. Greetings to you.
Warning Destiny! This is where the story of the Endless picks back up once more, this time in the Garden of Destiny. Destiny walks through his garden and wanders, since he doesn't really have a path of his own. He makes no choices and picks no branching ways, for his way has been laid out since creation, drawn and defined from the beginning to the end of everything. But this is when he has unexpected visitors, the Grey Ladies, the 3 women of fate. They have come to warn him that a king is about to forsake his kingdom, life and death will clash after this, the oldest of the battles will begin once again, and all of these things will come to life in Destiny's garden. The Grey Ladies leave without another word. Thus, Destiny looks in his book to learn more. They appear once more at the end of the 6th episode of Season 2, which is basically the beginning of issue 57 from the comics. Now, this is also the first issue of the Kindly One's story arc that spans from issue 57 to 69, and if you've checked the episode titles for the show, you will note that episode 9 of Season 2 is called The Kindly Ones. So yeah, from this point onward, we're getting into comic book exclusive territory, so if you don't want spoilers for the second half of Sandman Season 2, here's your chance to click away because that's exactly what's coming at you next. Let's get into it. Daniel goes missing. The Kindly Ones, who we now know are called by different names like the Hecate, the Furies, or the 3, appear in Sandman number 57 in their usual strange ways. This time, they were in a house with tea, chatter, games, and a fire crackling behind them. But when Cynthia opens a fortune cookie, she finds herself slapped with a warning. It was the same that the Fates had told Destiny not very long ago. A king will forsake his kingdom, life and death will crash and fray, and the oldest battle will begin once more. Cut to Lyta Hall, waking up to find sand in her bed, actually Daniel's bed to be exact. This triggers something and she immediately storms out with her newly born child and nearly shoves a homeless man into a breakdown, then starts questioning whether she's actually losing her grip. Oh, and about Daniel, He's the son of Hippolyta and her husband, but he was conceived in the dreaming, so he has an essence of Morpheus in him. She reveals that she has recently received a job offer from Eric Needham, who is better known as the washed-up vigilante Black Spider. He wants her to be his assistant, but she knows what he really wants is to get into her pants. Meanwhile, in the dreaming, Matthew the Raven's on a mission. Dream hasn't been seen in what feels like forever. It could be months, could be years, because time works differently in the dreaming. He checks in with the guards, then Nuala, the fairy who was given as a gift to Dream by her queen, but no one knows where the King of Dreams is. Finally, Lucian gives in and tells Matthew that Dream is by the shore, where he was sculpting nightmares. Turns out, Dream is working on a new Corinthian, but of course, this time around, Corinthian would not be the same as the last one. Matthew tries to ask what happens to ravens when they're done, and Dream reveals something really interesting when Matthew asks the question again later in the story. Back in the real world, Lyta comes back to the Lux nightclub, apparently giving Eric's offer a shot. He throws everything on the table, from big pay and the West Coast lifestyle to even childcare for Daniel, but to Lyta, it smells like bait. And then we notice that the piano player is Lucifer and the waitress is Mazzy Keen. Lyta's gut twists. She tries calling home, but no one answers, and she orders Eric to drive her home, but when she reaches home, all hell breaks loose because the house is torn apart, and Daniel, well, he was gone. A false accusation! Detective Luke Pinkerton arrives to investigate Daniel's disappearance. He acts polite, efficient, thorough, though no one yet knows that this isn't Pinkerton at all. It's actually Loki. He takes notes, keeps his tone calm, and quietly suggests Carla should stay with Lyta for a few days. She agrees. Meanwhile, Lyta wakes from a nightmare and screams. She tells Carla that she saw 3 women, the kindly ones, in her dream. They called her granddaughter and said she'd already met the man who took Daniel. He'll throw the child into a fire soon. They'll appear twice more, they warn her, and she'd better be ready with better questions next time. So, in the past, Loki was saved by Dream from getting imprisoned, and in return, Dream tells Loki that the god of mischief and lies owes him one. Secondly, Puck, the hobgoblin, also remained on Earth, and it's no wonder that they started working towards the same cause. Oh, and by the way, we're so happy to see Jack Gleason back in action. Personally, we missed watching him on screen. Anyways, Loki and Puck are the ones who took Daniel. They've got Daniel bound by a silver cord, inching him closer to an open fire. The moment Daniel gets close enough, Loki lifts him and notices something really strange. A phoenix feather. Normally, that's considered lucky, but Loki knows it can't be good for him, and in a state of panic and rush, he throws Daniel into the fire. Oh, and Lyta Hall, Daniel's mom, begins to lose it. You see, the kindly ones have burrowed into her head, and right then, Loki and Puck come to her in disguise. Like earlier, they were pretending to be Pinkerton and his aide. They tell her they've found a burnt child who could possibly be Daniel. They hand her a photo, and she takes it and shuts the door without saying a single word. And then she remembers something. Dream once came to see Daniel and told her that the kid was a part of the dreaming. While Dream did not really claim Daniel or want to separate the child from his mom, that's what it sounded like to Lyta. Once again, voices begin to rise in her mind, voices that were commanding her in a way. She laughs, but this laughter was kind of like how the Joker laughs, you know? The kind of laugh that doesn't end well. And then she walks out the door, ready for revenge. Sisters of Medusa! Lucifer gets a surprise visitor in the form of Remiel at Lux, which, by the way, is the nightclub that Lucifer Morningstar runs in Los Angeles. The conversation sours pretty fast, to be honest, because Lucifer pokes fun, and Remiel loses his temper, which is quite unlike him, and unbecoming of an angel made by the so-called creator. Oh, and not for nothing, but you should definitely check out our video on the Sandman Universe's creator. Anyways, Remiel spits on Lucifer, who doesn't react, and Lucifer doesn't respond with some grand retaliation or drama. In fact, he lets him leave. Remiel returns to hell, not to offer the place back, but to pass a message. The topic wasn't hell, it was Dream, and he makes it clear the next time, Duma will handle the talking. He won't be back. Meanwhile, Lyta walks through a world that doesn't exist. She's chasing revenge, and every step deeper into this mystical land draws her further from reality. A woman points her forward and gives her a coin, but in the real world, Lyta stands in the street. And as for the coin, it gets tossed to her by a stranger who thought she was begging. A Cyclops appears and shows her the next direction, but again, we cut to the real world and she's leaning on a street pole. Then a talking cat crosses her path and guides her onward. These strange guides all say the same thing. Never misname the kindly ones. Don't call them witches. Don't call them furies. They are older than gods, and even gods keep their distance. And I think for the purposes of this video, we're going to abide by that recommendation as well. Meanwhile, Rose finds it odd that the police never took anyone's statement. She checks the card that Detective Pinkerton left with her and finds it blank. Lyta finds an abandoned house where Stheno and Euryale offer her food and shelter. They miss their sister Medusa and suggest Lyta take her place. To eat, though, she must climb the hill to the tree. The tree belongs to Egil, Erethia, and Arethusa, and its guardian, aka Geryon, warns her. Eat, and she may lose something. But Lyta doesn't hesitate. She bites into the apple. In truth, she's beside a dumpster eating rotten fruit while a lizard watches nearby. Back in the dreaming, Dream retrieves a skull from his chest and summons Lucian and Matthew. He introduces them to his creation, the New Corinthian. It looks the same as the old one. Once satisfied, Dream places the skull in its head and brings it to life. Lyta wakes in the home of Euryale and Stheno. They greet her with water, but before she can drink, snakes burst from her scalp and help themselves instead. Finally, the sisters tell Lyta that they want her to become Medusa and to take the place of their lost sister. As expected, Lyta says no, and that she doesn't want an eternity to live or any sort of transformation. All she wants is revenge, nothing more, nothing less. Meanwhile, in the dreaming, Dream briefs the New Corinthian. Now, although this was a brand new nightmare, there's still a trace of the old one inside, enough to keep it interesting. His first mission is to find a child and bring him to the dreaming. Also, Matthew the Raven is assigned as his companion. He agrees, though he isn't thrilled about going with the Corinthian. On the other hand, Lyta, who is now back on the street, thinks of the farewell from Euryale and Stheno. The two sister Gorgons hand her two gifts. The first gift, a pair of claws of brass, and the second was the nimbic glimmering. In her head, it feels sacred, but the reality is different. In reality, she wanders, lost in thought. Meanwhile, it seems that Daniel is not truly dead, but Lyta doesn't know that. She stops in front of a store window, staring at her own reflections. They taunt her at first, then agree that revenge is the only thing they all want. She tears her shirt, makes a headband, and sets off. The kindly ones tell Rose about the children that flew. So in this one, we meet Rose in Sandman issue number 62, and just to jog your memory, Rose is the one who was supposed to be the Vortex, but was saved thanks to Unity, her grandmother. So Rose arrives in England and meets Jack Holdaway, the nephew of Mr. Holdaway, who is now deceased. Jack drives her to a care home owned by Paul Maguire, where she's granted access to her aunt's old room. On the way, she stumbles upon the same broom closet where she once met the kindly ones, but this time, an old woman stands outside and offers to take her into the day room. Inside, Rose meets Amelia, Magda, and Helena, so we kind of know who these ladies are. I mean, it has not been explicitly stated, but they seem to be a representation of the kindly ones. They invite Rose to join them, and what follows feels less like a parable full of warnings and stuff. The tale is about a deceitful man and the children who grew wings. The man once seduced a woman by stealing her clothes while she bathed. He promised her marriage in return for her body, and the poor woman agreed. He swore that if he ever broke that promise, the worms would eat him alive and his children would sprout wings and fly away. Of course, he ends up breaking the promise. He pretended an old woman he murdered was his aunt and gave her cottage to the mother of his children. He resumed his philandering, visiting only once or twice a month. By then, she had 3 daughters. He loved them despite his nature, but one visit, the girls had vanished. The mother claimed they flew away. Enraged, he hacked her to death and hid her under the bed, but that's when the daughters returned. With wings and claws, they tore their father to pieces. He died, but his spirit lingered. His murdered wife greeted him in the afterlife, monstrous and waiting. He tried to escape, begged for death, but it was too late. Fire, water, and thunder ignored him. The worms came instead. One, with his wife's face, began eating him slowly and promised to never stop. The 3 women tell Rose this is what men deserve. Women give birth to them, raise them, and bury them. Rose then heads to her grandmother's old room and leaves behind the amulet Unity had once given her. A cat and an owl appear, startling her, and then Paul shows up. He takes Rose to the basement, where he reveals Alex Burgess, his great love, was still trapped in sleepy sickness ever since Unity awoke. Paul believes Alex might wake someday too. Before leaving, Rose places the amulet beside Alex instead, deciding it belongs with him more than anywhere else. Again, Alex is the son of the man who caged Sandman. Of course, his father had died ages ago and Alex inherited the property. Anyways, the point of this story was that the kindly ones had all but established that they're not really fans of men who break the rules. And by the next installment, that is Sandman number 63, Lyta finally tells the kindly ones what she wants in revenge. But the 3 ladies remind her that they don't act unless there's a blood debt, and that's a rule. Her target must have killed a member of the family, and Lyta feels the loss settle in again, but the sisters learn that Dream spilled family blood when he killed his own son. Although that's what Orpheus wanted, it was filicide nonetheless. The kindly ones make their move. Back in the dreaming, all the world's ravens gather and they all wait silently, but there's someone else in the dreaming too, someone who doesn't quite belong there. Then, Lyta Hall arrives, or something using her form. She casts 3 shadows as she enters, which was enough proof that the kindly ones were with her. The griffin blocks her path, but they reduce him to dust. Before more lives could be lost, Dream appears before them and grants them an audience. As expected, they accuse him of murdering his own son, Orpheus. Lyta adds Daniel's name to the list of children he has killed, and, true to their nature, the kindly ones promise Dream that they were here for vengeance and they would have it sooner rather than later. Once they leave, Dream contacts the Corinthian and Matthew. He tells them finding Daniel is the only thing that matters now. It was not long before the nightmare and the raven track the kid down, but a wolf attacks before they get far. Although the Corinthian kills the wolf with ease, they now know that they've been expected. The dreaming mourns the griffin, and his funeral is attended by each and everyone who is present in the dreaming. But more importantly, a serious threat has presented itself, and Dream knows it. Meanwhile, the Corinthian corners Loki, who's been pretending to be Dream. Matthew still hasn't caught on, but the Corinthian has no doubts about the same. He wraps his hands around Loki's throat and doesn't stop until the trickster god nearly dies. The Corinthian then tells Matthew that he'll use Loki's eyes to track Daniel. On the other hand, the kindly ones, who were still sort of processing Lyta, began their hunt for targets whose deaths would wound Dream physically as well as emotionally. First, they kill a bear. Then they stab Gilbert, aka Fiddler's Green, in the chest. Back in the dreaming, an unknown force pulls Matthew. Dream informs him of Gilbert's death, but there wasn't really any time to grieve over the dead, and Dream vanishes again, only to meet Thessaly, the ancient witch and one of Dream's former lovers. Dream has had many lovers over his long life, but now all of them are at risk. Dream now wants to destroy Lyta's body, but it wasn't going to be easy because of a certain protective circle around her. At the funeral of Fiddler's Green, Matthew pays his respects. The other ravens pick apart Gilbert's body, and the funeral pretty much turns into a feast. But it wasn't really out of cruelty as much as it was out of, necessity. You see, a war was coming, and wars meant more carrion. And by the end of the 65th issue of the Sandman Comics, the Corinthian finally rescues Daniel. Preparing for the final battle. Meanwhile, Lyta murders Abel, and the Corinthian and Daniel finally reach the dreaming, and it wasn't before long that Dream returns, relieved that Daniel was safe and sound. But the battle had reached its full swing, and the kindly ones arrived in the dreaming using Lyta's form. They strike him across the face with a whip made of scorpions. It's at this point that Lyta sees Daniel, alive and well, and the misunderstanding comes to an end. She pleads with the voices inside her to stop, but they refuse. You see, this was never really about Daniel. This was justice for Orpheus, Dream's own son. Dream speaks with Lucien one more time, puts on his helm, his armor, and prepares for what he can't avoid. Dream sits with Matthew and explains that the ruby wasn't the only vessel to carry his essence. There were others. He holds out an emerald, one of those stones, and says he's already had a talk with Daniel about what comes next. Matthew raises an eyebrow. Daniel is 3. What kind of conversation could that be? Dream insists it happened. He hands Daniel the emerald, puts on his helm, and prepares to leave. Matthew blocks his path. He's not about to let his master walk to his death alone. Dream doesn't argue. He nods and lets the raven follow. On the edge of the dreaming, Dream and Matthew wait. Dream confides in his raven and reveals what happened to the others. Some ravens chose to die. Some returned to mortal life. Others stayed. And also that Lucien was the first. A raven who stayed long enough to become something else. Dream stands before the kindly ones, prepared for battle, but they don't want to fight. They'll destroy the dreaming piece by piece until he pays what he's owed. The old laws remain. A blood debt must be answered, and Dream totally understands this. Back at the castle, Death arrives. She meets Daniel, thanks Lucien for the last book, and asks where her brother is. Dream, who is now stripped of his tools, hands his helm and pouch to Matthew. He shrinks them, making them light enough for the raven to carry, and gives him one last order: fly back. Deliver the items. Tell Death her brother is calling. Matthew obeys. He flies, and behind him, on a quiet shore, Dream waits, shirtless and ready. Dream's long game. Death finds her brother on the shores of Nightmare. Their conversation picks up where it left off years ago when they sat in a park feeding birds. For old time's sake, she conjures bread and pigeons, but Dream isn't really interested in nostalgia. He's tired, like tired in his bones, centuries old tired. that sort. He finally admits it. Meanwhile, the Corinthian saves Matthew by throwing a knife straight into a nimbus that had crept up behind the Raven. Corinthian, Lucian, Cain, and Matthew all come to the same conclusion. The kindly ones have unleashed Dream's oldest prisoners, and the dreaming is beginning to fracture. Back on the shore, Death pushes Dream. She knows what's happening. You see, long ago, the dreaming was taken from him, and he fought tooth and nail to reclaim it. But now, he won't even lift a finger. Dream tells her that this wasn't how he planned it, but still, he feels caged by the dreaming. For all its wonder, it traps him. Death reminds him that he could walk away, like Destruction did. Dream can't. He was never built for escape. She hugs him. That hug sends ripples through every world. Earthquakes tear through the dreaming. Lyta screams in 3 voices. The kindly ones appear again, flinging words like knives. Death silences them with 1 scream. She knows it's time, and Dream says he's prepared everything. Death already knows that he's been setting this up for years. This was never a chain of random events. It was always the plan. She smiles. They reach for each other, fingers touch, and light swallows the dreaming whole. When it fades, both of them are gone. In the end, Alex Burgess wakes from his endless sleep. So does Lyta. She's herself again. In the dreaming, the ravens wait to feast, but Daniel raises the emerald, turns it into a pendant, and places it around his neck. His skin turns white. Lucien and the Corinthian recognize him immediately. This isn't Daniel, this is Dream. The kindly ones return to their lair. Their work is done. They crack open another fortune cookie. This time it reads, "Flowers gathered in the morning, you can be me when I'm gone." None of them understands it, so they toss the paper aside and keep spinning fate. So yeah, that's everything we know about the kindly ones, the 3 in 1, the 1 in 3. But you know what? We never discussed their backstory, who they were before their appearance in the comics. So let's do that, shall we? To the ancient Greeks, they were first known as the Moirae, or the Fates, the weavers of life and death. Clotho spun the thread of life, Lachesis measured out its length, and Atropos made the final cut. So now, the whole thread-cutting scene from the end of episode 6 of the 2nd season makes more sense, we hope. But these same 3 ladies also moonlighted as the Furies, the fierce Erinyes. Had they been working in one of the corporations from today, they'd pretty much be called out for taking 2 job roles. Anyways, nobody dared call them that openly, and they preferred the safer, less wrath-provoking name, the Kindly Ones, or Eumenides. Sophocles called them Daughters of Earth and Shadow, and named the 3 as Tisiphone, Megara, and Alecto. You must realize that their vengeance was so dreadful that even the gods tiptoed around them. The earliest Greek version of the Fates, or the Kindly Ones, was Hecate, a triple goddess ruling over the heavens as Luna, Earth as Artemis, or Cynthia, and the underworld as Hecate herself. Known as Hecate Trioditis, which literally meant Hecate of the 3 ways, her devotees worshipped her at crossroads, conveniently placed next to gallows, and that explains the gifts that Sandman brought them in Season 1. Later, in medieval times, she got a darker makeover as the Queen of Ghosts and Mistress of Black Magic. In Roman circles, these same ladies took the form of Fortuna, or the Parcae, and oversaw the lives of emperors. Before Rome was Rome, the Latins worshipped them as Juventus, the maiden, Juno, the mother, and Minerva, the wise crone. Even the Vikings had their version of the Fates called the Norns, who decided destinies of gods and mortals right from birth. On the other hand, the Anglo-Saxons called them the Weirds, or Weird Sisters, the very same trio Macbeth later bumped into. In Ireland, the 3 were called the Queens of Ulster, and these so-called queens looked after the shrine of Morrigan, a raven goddess whose triple personas included Nemhan, Babd, and Macha. Morrigan was a cunning strategist, fierce in war, who later was given a new image as Morgan Le Fay, aka Merlin's powerful rival who often got the upper hand. The Egyptians saw them as mothers to all, and the 3 cauldrons represented the expecting mother's womb. Here, they were called Maat, Hathor, and Nekhbet. When they were together, they were called Mut. During the Middle Ages, the 3 mostly appeared in humble homes, in stories whispered by good wives and wise women who quietly preserved the ancient rites. It wasn't until the early 1970s that the 3 felt comfortable stepping back into the spotlight. Apparently, they had been encouraged by the women's movement and rising interest in mysticism. The witches resurfaced as charming hosts and storytellers, cleverly hiding their old mythical roots behind casual chats and friendly banter. Today, they watch over friendly YouTube creators and punish those who don't like and subscribe to their videos after watching the whole thing. Just kidding, but we are at the end of this video and we hope you liked it. Until next time, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.